Hello YouTube, I'm back. Behind me, we've got a crazy, stupidly massive D&D castle. Is it practical for D&D? Maybe not so much. Could it be playable for D&D? Absolutely. We've been spending, I think this is video number 7 now, building this massive castle. This is actually a replica of the castle from the video game Kingdom Come Deliverance. This is the Talmberg Castle from Talmberg in the Czech Republic. And I decided to make things a little crazy with it. We built this massive, huge base here, way over the top for anything tabletop gaming related, clearly, but actually the castle itself on the top actually comes off into 2 sections and it is playable on the tabletop. Before we get any further, you're probably wondering where I've been, or if you're new to the channel, you could care less where I've been. So I've been away for quite some time now, and we're gonna get to that in a little bit later in the video, but this is actually a new studio that I'm in. It's it's not very large, but it's a lot bigger than the one that I had before. So we got a few things left here. I've got to finish some siding. We've got something to do with the bridge over here, as well as a pathway over here and stuff. But the main thing is actually the ocean right here. Now, I've made oceans before, or a ocean before, and I really wanted to do something different with that one and really make it dynamic and really interesting. Now, I think I somewhat succeeded in that, but I want to go way bigger and way more dynamic. I'm talking waves crashing up against the lighthouse, up against the cliffs. As I was thinking about this, a new idea came into mind, and an idea that I got incredibly excited about. And that's what this video is going to be about. Now, this could be a complete and total failure, so I'm going to need some opinions from actually some of the experts out there. So hang around, watch the video, and you can give me some pointers, because there is a very big chance this is actually not going to work out at all. Okay, so I'm here at my computer, and you might be asking yourself why. Well, in that little sequence you saw earlier, you saw me taking a bunch of pictures around the castle with my cell phone here. As I was thinking about how I'm going to be carving these waves out, I was realizing more and more this is going to be a ton of work, and it's going to be extremely messy. So the idea came to mind: what if I 3D scan the castle, then use the physics fluid simulation to simulate the waves crashing up against this thing, and from there 3D print out the entire ocean of these waves crashing up against this castle, and use that to cast the ocean in resin. So I got this program called Kiri Engine here on my phone, and this is actually a 3D scanning app that I use. And you saw in that sequence there that I was taking a whole bunch of pictures of the castle. I was actually using this to do that. And funny story actually, so yes, Kiri Engine is actually the official sponsor for this video. However, I'd actually planned this video, downloaded the Kiri Engine app, and used it on the castle long before I'd even considered reaching out to them as a sponsor. And it wasn't until I watched a recent video of Tabletop Time and saw Kiri as a sponsor for their super cool video, where they used the app to completely digitize an entire gaming table along with the armies in 3D to make an epic battle report using Unreal Engine 5. It's crazy. Go watch that video after this one. So yeah, after seeing that, I knew they would make the absolute perfect sponsor for this video. I'd already used the app. It's amazing. I haven't paid for the full version. There actually are 2 versions of the app. One is a free version and a paid, and I started out with the free version, which uses the exact same photogrammetry algorithm as the paid version. But the free version lets you take up to a set of 70 photos, whereas the full paid version gives you a whopping 200 photos to take, which then uses all that information to make the most detailed 3D model possible. And if you use Blender like me, the Pro version actually allows you to export the 3D model in quads and can even generate PBR materials for hardcore use cases. I obviously went with the paid version and I was very, very happy with the results. Now you can actually also use your DSLR camera to take all your photos and then upload them onto their webpage where you can get even more detail and more quality through that process. And as well, you can do the same with your drones. You can take that drone up into the air, take some footage of your whole entire yard, your landscape, upload that to the Curie webpage, and it will do the same thing there and process that footage and turn that into an amazing 3D landscape, fully textured. So thank you, Curie Engine, for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the action. So our waves are going to crash up against this. We're going to simulate it, doing a water simulation, and then we're going to freeze that and 3D print it off, and then cast that in resin. So I was wondering actually how much of this process I should put into the video, seeing as it doesn't really involve like any hands-on stuff. However, it's incredibly interesting, super cool, and it's going to be defining the overall look of our ocean all said and done. So to not include it, I think would really be doing you guys a disservice and leave you in the dark as to how it all actually works. So we've got our 3D scan castle here fully imported into Blender. Now, if you're wondering how to get your model off the Curie Engine app onto your computer, it's as simple as exporting, typing in your email address and sending that off, and you'll get a link for the download, and it's as easy as that. So the area we're really interested in is, of course, this area here where the ocean is set to reside. And so it's time to set up our physics simulation. Now for that in Blender, there are 3 things that we need to make this work. So 1 is a domain, 2 a flow object, and 3 an effector. Now it sounds complicated, but it's actually really simple. The domain is just a boundary box to contain our fluid. So there always needs to be bounds for the fluid so it just doesn't float off into space. So we start that off with a cube, and all parts of the simulation must be contained within this cube, within our domain. Next, we need a flow object, and as the name suggests, this is the source of our fluid from where our water will be emitted or where it will flow from, hence the name flow object. And finally, there are our effectors, and you can have more than one of these. These are objects that directly affect our simulation. Again, effectors, they like to make it easy for us. So for us, this is going to be our 3D scan of the castle and its cliffs. So just throwing it into our domain won't actually do anything in the water, will just flow right through it like it's not even there. You first need to tell Blender that you want this castle to be able to interact with the fluid, and for that we need to add collision physics to our 3D scan castle. And now our fluid will be affected by the presence of our castle and collide with it during our simulation. So now we have the basics for a simulation all set up. Easy, right? Well, now comes the difficult part, and holy moly, if you have any hair left by the time this process is done, you've done well. So the whole trick here is actually getting your scene to look to proper scale, to make the waves look realistic for a giant cliffside with waves crashing up against that. It's going to look a lot different than water splashing around in a glass. And the bigger the scale of your scene, the smaller the liquid particles need to be, and therefore the more of them you're going to be needing in the scene. Here is where the problem lies. So let's do a quick little real-world illustration here. Watch what happens when I pour some water into this little cup here and slosh it around. So just take note of how the water is behaving. It's quite erratic and fast. When you slow it down, there are lots of big droplets. The water is really kind of globular. Now compare that with this footage here of this incredibly rough and turbulent ocean. The water is behaving completely different to the eye, and this is due to scale. So at the small scale in the cup, it's fast and chaotic with large droplets, but at a large scale, the waves are a lot slower but daunting with a greater sense of power. power pulverized against the rock, smashing that water into the teeniest, tiniest little droplets, which actually forms a mist and all these tiny little air bubbles that make up white water. You don't see any of that in the cup. So, all of that to say, a castle is a much greater scale than a cup of water, therefore it needs way more fluid particles to act appropriately and actually look to scale, and therefore that means we need exponentially more computing power than it does to simulate a cup of water. And that, my friends, is where the problem lies. The computer gets bogged way down. Any tiny changes that you make in an attempt to make things look better takes hours to compute in order for you to go in and review your results and actually see the consequences of your inputs. So after hours, days, and I'm slightly embarrassed to say even weeks, we finally came to this. Now, this is far from perfect. As you'll see, there's a lot of erratic behavior from the waves. It gets a little crazy on the edges. And then as it moves on there, it doesn't really even look that dramatic. This frame right here is about as good as I got it, but it's still not great. But did you catch it right at the start there? Right at the very beginning, we got this frame right here. Now I know what you're thinking, it's not deep enough at all. We got a great splash against the rocks, but where's the rest of the ocean? Well, I was thinking of combining two frames actually, this shot and then another where that kind of ocean area is really dramatic. But when we got around to actually turning all these little particles into an actual 3D mesh that could be 3D printed, the results were less than satisfactory, as you can see here. Now this was disappointing, like pretty disappointing. I wasn't really sure how this would look. It's very bumpy, very rough, doesn't look like a nice ocean. I was really honestly thinking this was as good as it's gonna get. However, I did remember seeing a video way back when of a really nice ocean, and I remember there's a tool that you can actually use, this ocean tool inside Blender, to create just a nice, like, deep ocean out in the middle of nowhere. And I discovered the tool, played around with it, tweaking all the various settings, and ended up with this. Now this I was happy with. This combined with that big splash really had the potential to make this thing look good, like really good. Alright, now it's time to get this thing 3D printed. So obviously I don't have a printer that's over 5 feet long and 2 feet-ish wide, so we got to break this thing up into many itty bitty sections suitable for 3D printing. So very long story short, seeing as this is not as nearly as interesting as the simulation, basically what I've done here is just break this down into little sections out of the size of my printer bed. Now it's really important that I keep track of each of these cubes, so I came up with a naming system where the rows in one direction are A, B, C, D, E, and then in the other direction 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 9. This way I can have piece A1, A2, A3, C6, D7, etc. This is extremely important because I don't want to accidentally be printing multiples of any of these. Now ZBrush is the program of choice. This is perfect for splitting meshes this way. And so I did this again after many hours of work, and thus the printing began. Now, here's where it all comes together. After hours upon hours of computer processing and incredibly complex and dynamic fluid simulation, weeks upon weeks of 3D printing, we come to this. Now look at that, it fits perfectly around the lighthouse. How incredibly satisfying is that? Thank you, ZBrush. Okay, printing all this out took me a very long time. We're finally here at the stage to start assembling this and get it prepped for the big resin pour. Now, I do have right here this massive amount of resin right here. I got 3 gallons, 2 parts resin, well, 1 part hardener. So it's 3 gallons, I think around 11.4 liters, something like that. Now, I did do a calculation on ZBrush for the wave, the whole body of water here. So yes, I did the calculation and it's a whopping 34 liters. And if you look at the depth of this thing, particularly around the lighthouse area, you'll see this sucker is going to be deep. So yes, 9 gallons or 34 flippin' liters of resin. And I got 11.4. So when I saw that, I was kind of like, that's a lot of resin. Way more than like 3 times what I've got. This is how high this water is gonna be for this portion of the waves. So we got a lot of filling to do. We're gonna be filling that in with like some coral, some rock formations, really building that up underneath because there's no way, almost 6 inches high. We're not gonna go that high. I kind of learned as I went. You can see we got all of this inside stuff. I don't need all that. I evolved from like this to this, this little guy right here. And eventually some pieces like this where it has the proper height. And we'll start assembling all this together. I'm gonna have them in chunks. I'll probably go about 3 chunks, I'm thinking, poured separately. If I pour this all at once and something goes wrong, that is really, really bad. We've already spent a lot of money here and I do not want to throw any of that or pour any of that down the drain, figuratively speaking. And from here, it's just gluing each of the pieces together. And now as you look at these waves and the splashes, you're probably saying, Neil, what was the deal with all this scale talk earlier? That looks exactly like the splashes that were in the little dish you splashed around. So yes and no. Yes, these splashes aren't exactly 100% to scale. If they were, they'd be pulverized and we'd have a mist. And I'd have to use something like cotton, which trust me, won't look good at all. We're going to be taking care of that spray and that white water still, but these splashes are going to be acting as the base for our waves still. We're going to have white water inside of them as well. On the exterior, I'm going to be adding the same white water technique that I used on the Wizard Tower using snow and resin. And once those elements are added in, then you'll have proper perspective and scale with these splashes. And here we have it. Crazy, that's all I can say. I mean, it's an epic castle. It deserves an epic, monstrously crazy ocean. This was the best idea I came up with that would really make this thing just stand out above anything else. Try and carve it myself, I know would have been very, very time consuming and very difficult. It may seem like a bit of a waste because I'm not going to be using this again, but honestly, this is what YouTube, in my opinion, is made for. Doing crazy stuff like this, making a crazy sculpture. Many famous artists and people have done way crazier stuff than this. So I think it is definitely well deserved. Put everything we got, all our resources in. Big thank you to Phrozen for the printer, for the 3D printer, as well as the majority of this resin. And of course, a big thank you to Hury Engine for sponsoring the video. Without them, this wouldn't have happened. This castle scan, as detailed and insane as that was, wouldn't have happened. And because of Curie Engine, we got to do this. So make sure you go check out that app. The link is down in the description. But yeah, let's take a look at this ocean. Honestly, I could not be any happier with that. Just take a look. Like, this is no slouch. This guy right here is big, this wave. But as you can see, this is going to be very difficult in the casting process. We got this kind of curvature here. So the problem is going to be, once we get the rubber silicone on, getting all these splashes out. That's where the problem is going to come. Now, I'm going to be taking care of a lot of that using something called epoxy sculpt for all these little holes and things. Those are going to be very bad for casting. So what I've got here is this epoxy sculpt, and I'm going to be using that to fill in those gaps. Also fill in all these cracks in here. I've got a chipped piece right there. I'll just fill that in and then Dremel it out and carve it to make it look like the ocean. Just absolutely crazy. I mean, I'm excited. I'm also extremely nervous. The hard part is yet to come. Fingers crossed for that, because that's what I'm going to be doing right now as you're watching this video, is trying to get this casting process figured out. So yes, we're on the right path to an epic ocean for an equally epic castle. Couldn't be happier. I hope you enjoyed the video, and a big thank you to all my Patreon supporters that stuck around through this hard time that I've gone through. So yes, I did mention that at the end of the video I would be addressing where I've been. So as you may or may not know, if you're a follower of the channel, my wife had been undergoing some extremely difficult health issues. Basically, things were getting more and more stressful. Things were building up. My wife was not getting any better. It was a very difficult time in many areas. And basically, burnout came in there heavy with all the stress. And it is pretty heavy stress. Like that's what it was stress. Tie that in with guilt for having just kind of left. Like, the intention wasn't to be gone for 6 months, I guess is what it is now. Not even close. Maybe a month, maybe just a little bit of time just to breathe. And honestly, just my anxieties, kind of anything channel related, trying to get anything done, just built up, and it just was, I was just not in the headspace at all that I needed to be in. And it's called the negative cycle loop for a reason. You're guilty, and the guilt feeds on things, and it just causes this never-ending cycle that's really difficult to break out of if you're not really healthy. And that's kind of what I needed to do, was get healthy, just take a rest, take a break, just shut off. And I think it's been good. It's been not great, but I'm in a good spot now. And that's what's important here. And I'm excited to get back into the channel. I'm excited to making content again. Like, it just wasn't enjoyable. Like, it was and it wasn't. Like, when I was in the zone, it was enjoyable, but getting into that zone space was very hard. But I just want to apologize to all my subscribers for just kind of leaving. Not what I intended to do, not what I wanted to do, but here we are, we're back, and I'm really excited. Very much appreciate and love all of you, and I love and thank you to everyone who sent positive message, wishes, prayers, all of that stuff for me and my family. I thank you so much, and honestly, those are what helped me keep going and keep the drive to come back, do this stuff in the background, 3D printing all this, still slowly plugging away, chipping away at things. And each time I'd see a positive message like that, it would just really fuel me and keep me going. So thank you to all of you. Love you guys, and I'll be seeing you on the next one.